Hello guys, good day. How was the prelim examination? It's a very hectic week last week. So for the start of the midterm period, guys, we'll be exploring now properly ethics. Now, ethics as a field of or discipline of philosophy. So before we embark on a journey to explore these different paradigms which I have told you in the prelim period. I have mentioned you during our virtual classes that we're going to explore several ethical paradigms for us to be acquainted, for us to be familiar of the different ways a certain action is judged or assessed. So with this module for the midterm period, we'll begin exploring the criteria, the foundation, or the basis of a moral or ethical act, because we cannot really appreciate, no, we cannot really um, you know understand the beauty of all these paradigms which we're going to explore in the entire semester if we will not dig first of all the foundation or the criteria of a moral act. So to begin with, guys, I'd like to share to you a line from one of my favorite philosophers, Jean-Paul Sartre. I did a thesis on him and the other side, Frederick Sartre and Nietzsche during my undergrad studies. So according to Jean-Paul Sartre, everything has been figured out except how to live. That means everything has been figured out. We have discovered the vastness of space, we have explored the depths of the ocean, but it seems that when we talk about how to live, what it really means to be human, I think that is where we find ourselves in confusion. No? We are perplexed, and we are actually in the position of doubt as to the question, how do we really have to live, no? And what is the good life? And what when you say fully human being is a happy, a fully grown human being, what is the meaning of that? And that is why we embark on this study. So the questions I have so far shared to you guys, what it means to be human, what is the good life, to sum up in one word, how to live, actually is the true business of philosophy. So not only about goodness, but all of reality is the business of reality. But since we are dealing with an action and the goodness or the badness of an action, specifically this is the domain of ethics. Okay, so to help us figure out how to live when old beliefs no longer hold water. We are in the time, our time, 21st century is a time of tension because the old is no longer fully operational, old models of thinking, and the new is not yet fully articulated. So that is why if you happen to be in the 21st century, we'll come to tell this in the future that this is a time of confusion, a time of tension, a time of, it's a breaking point, no? Between the old and the new. Okay? So however, in figuring out anything, we need to radically go to its cause or reason for being. So any philosophical study of anything needs to answer, first of all, the foundation and criteria of any claim or assertion. Otherwise, it is nothing but unreflected mere opinion. It is on this note that we need to explore the criteria and foundation of any statement asserting ethical claims, because our field is ethics, the field we are exploring, because that is the um, description of Unit 7. A number of you guys were not able to get it during the prelim examination. The course description of Unit 7, some of you answered wrongly. Okay, so before we proceed, guys, I am expecting you to learn the following competencies after the end of this lesson. First, you should be able to distinguish and understand the classical foundations or criteria of the human act. That is the first requirement, the first competency that I wanted you to learn. Second is you must be able to differentiate the difference between human act and acts of man. And third, you must be able to understand the difference between ethical relativism and ethical absolutism. The problem when there are more moral principles, and also the need to only have one. No, so we will try to understand that in this lesson, as well as you. Okay, and their implications in any judgment of actions claiming ethical value. And then fourth, you should be able to appreciate the conflicting ethical trends as a reflection of the richness of the ethical experience. Okay, so that is my hope and my my aim, the objectives of this module. In classical ethical theories, guys, there are four foundations, criteria, or requirement for an act to be either judged moral or immoral. That means not all acts are under the label of a moral act, because some acts are labeled amoral. That means they don't carry a moral weight. For example, eating, you're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting yourself, or taking a bath. No, these are examples of immoral activities, meaning they don't carry a moral weight. So these these four criteria, guys, only applies to acts which have moral weight. Okay, I hope it is clear to you that we are referring now to moral acts, not to immoral acts. Amoral do not carry a moral weight unless it is implied. For example, you are eating and then you are eating something that can kill you. That is already a moral act. But when you just eat normally for the benefit of your body, you are not harming yourself, you are not harming anybody. The morality of that action actually is not a question, not a question. Okay, so we are referring here the four requirements or criteria or foundation to acts that carry moral weight. What are these four foundations? We have the it is classical, that is why you need to understand that based on classical ethical theories, we have number one, existence of God; number two, immortality of the soul; third, freedom or free will; and fourth, knowledge. Okay, so we'll begin with existence of God. So ethical theorists during the scholastic medieval era firmly asserted that without God, any act could be permitted. That is, if there is no supreme being that warrants supreme value of what is good, any action could be just judged according to personal standards. So this is actually the dilemma of the characters of Fyodor Dostoevsky's novels, if you are familiar with the writings of Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian novelist. All his characters, guys, are actually troubled and disturbed by the issue of if there is a God, people could live good lives. If there is no God, evidently people will believe that everything is permitted because there is no supreme value that warrants or that measures a certain action. No standard of goodness, as what they say. So if that is the case, then people will just judge their actions based on their personal standards. Okay, so to convince people of the importance of these moral criteria or requirements, the scholastics even created elaborate rational proofs of God's existence, because they believe that by only relying on faith, it is not that solid. So that is why an example of famous proofs of God's existence are from St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Anselm of Canterbury, among others. So few of these examples, guys, of the proof of God's existence are the following: the argument from motion, the argument from causality, the argument from design, and Anselm's ontological argument. Okay, how did they proceed, guys, these people, Thomas Aquinas and Anselm? According to St. Thomas Aquinas, God exists because we discovered in reality that there are motions. No? I was able to move because something moved me. And what is that? An energy, a force within me. Or you move, or you are moving because there is a force within you that moves you. And that is why when you die, that force departs from you and you are no longer moving. And that is why Aristotle is the one who gave that idea to St. Thomas Aquinas, that there is a principle of life called the soul. Not yet the immortal or mortal or whatever belief you have about the soul, but the soul as something that is a principle of life. So if the soul moves the body, meaning something must have moved the soul. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, that is the order of things. No? Something is moving because something moves it. Until you reach to the limit of a mover which is not moving or not being moved, rather. So a mover that is not moved by another mover. And we call that the unmoved mover. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, that is of course God. No? A mover that is no longer moved by any other mover but the source of all motion. That is the argument from motion. Argument from causality is closely related with motion, guys. If you are effects, no, you are surely an effect. You are the effect of the love of your parents, no. And in the world of reality, guys, we see there are effects and there are causes. And it is a series. Something is caused because there are causes. An effect is a cause of something. And when you try to argue and reason out towards the limit of this, you will come to a point of an uncaused cause, because it is contradictory to reason to believe that it is endless. We call that in philosophy argumentum ad absurdum, no? An absurd reasoning to say that motion is endless, the causes and effects are endless. It will be against reason. So reason posits the idea that causality should end at a point wherein the cause of all the effects is no longer caused by any other cause. And that is we call causa sui in Latin, meaning a self-cause causing everything. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, that is of course God. Who would that be if that cause is no longer caused by any other causes? And that is obviously God. Okay, another argument, guys, which St. Thomas Aquinas, borrowing from the insights of Aristotle, which also convinced his contemporaries during the medieval period, is the argument from design. If you look at nature, there is the order of nature, the order of the plants growing from the seed to a fully grown tree, of a baby growing up into a fully human being. There is an order of things which, if we try to look at it, is designed beautifully. It's designed beautifully. Just take a look at the flowers, how it is arranged. We call it the Fibonacci sequencing. If you remember your Fibonacci sequencing during your elementary and high school, when things are arranged in a very wonderful way. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, even the entire universe is governed by a force that makes it a powerful reflection of order. The great novelist, guys, James Joyce, called this chiasmos, order behind chaos. Just examine, for example, the sun. For the sun to give off its beautiful light, just imagine the number of nuclear explosions happening within. We call that chiasmos. Chaos plus order. Chaos plus cosmos, order. And with that, guys, we can say that if there is the design of the universe, and it is intelligently expressing itself through all of these operations of reality of nature and of the universe, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, then there must be a supreme designer. There must be an architect, because designed universe cannot just pop up into thin air. And here we come because of evolution. So Saint Thomas Aquinas said there must be a designer, and that is of course, according to him, God. Okay, notice we are not explaining the existence of God using verses from the Bible. Well, we're explaining only using reason. And that is the beauty of philosophy when it is properly used, not abused. No, because there are so many people also who abuse philosophy. Okay, and one of the powerful argument, which is not the same that of Saint Thomas Aquinas, was the argument of Saint Anselm of Canterbury. One of the explanations of God's existence that I love most. How did Saint Anselm proceed? According to Saint Anselm, God is that which nothing greater can be thought of. Did you get the point? God is that which nothing or no one greater can be thought of. Did you get the point? If you have not gotten the point, guys, I'd like to share to you how it was discussed usually in our philosophy classes. It proceeded this way. Imagine Saint Anselm having a conversation with an atheist. So first, perhaps, Saint Anselm will say, hey, Mr. Atheist, do you believe in God? Obviously, the atheist will say, no. That is obvious. And then Anselm might be telling the atheist, but if there is a God, do you believe that that God is a perfect God? That nothing greater or no one greater can be thought of as greater than that God? Or greater or higher than that God? And the atheist said, obviously, because a God that is imperfect is unacceptable. Because a God that is not perfect is not a God. And from there, guys, Saint Anselm said, and when someone is perfect, can that someone exist or not? Now that is the trap, no? The atheist was trapped, because if you say that God is perfect, when you say perfect, all the elements are in that someone. All the elements, and one of that element is obviously perfection. How could a perfect God not exist when perfection is one of the elements of perfect? When perfection is existence rather is one of the elements of perfection. Actually, to say that a perfect God, to say that God is perfect and say that He does not exist, according to Saint Anselm, is a contradiction. Because when you say something exists, when you say something is perfect, that something must exist, because existence is a characteristic of perfection. Because something that is perfect and doesn't exist is another absurd reasoning. Did you get the point now? Okay, so just imagine a certain, when you say perfect being. In reality, of course, you cannot see that in perfect being. But because you have thought of that, according to Saint Anselm, there must be a perfect being somewhere else. Because that perfection requires existence as one of its characteristics. Okay, that is Saint Anselm's argument, although it is a little bit tricky, but that is the point. Okay, so that is the point of Anselm. Very tricky and very clever, because he, unlike Saint Thomas Aquinas, Saint Anselm did not use reality. He only used the operations of the mind to prove that God exists. Okay, so that is existence of God. So they are anchoring arguments about God's existence on a solid ground, because for them morality cannot really exist without the existence of God. Okay, that is existence of God. I know you have so many questions there. Just take note of those questions. Okay, we'll be dealing with that as we explore more of this in our virtual class during our synchronous schedules. Okay, so the next, guys, is immortality of the soul. The next foundation requirement, immortality of the soul. According to scholastic ethics, guys, for any judgment of the morality or immorality of an act, the soul must be immortal, to ensure that there will be an accounting of all you have done or not done, but should be done when you are only on a mortal body. Okay, I will repeat. According to this argument, according to scholastic ethics, for any judgment of the morality or immorality of an act, the soul must be immortal, meaning it should survive beyond the physical death, to ensure that there will be an accounting of all you have done and not done, but should have been done. No? So, kanabang you are doing something at good, but sometimes you're not also doing something good that makes you immoral. Okay? And you'll be judged according to that, according to this model. So, without the immortality of the soul, we cannot have an accounting, and therefore, if there is no accounting of all your actions, there is no meaning at all in why you do good acts. So this is closely related to the first requirement, because if there is an accounting of your acts, there should be an accountant, which according to this model, it is God that will give a decree of either giving you a reward or punishment that you either enjoy or suffer in all eternity. So what is, according to this requirement, guys, of moral act, what is the use of doing good if there are no rewards? What is the use of doing, why not do bad, no, when there is no punishment? Because in reality, guys, we all agree that sometimes doing bad gives us more pleasure. Doing good is difficult. Okay? So that is immortality of the soul. It requires, no, a certain growth of humans to enjoy doing good things. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, the third, guys, is freedom. Freedom, so, is a third requirement. So by this thing, guys, we mean that any act that is not grounded on free will or free choice cannot be judged moral or immoral. So one of the requirements or basis of an act that should be judged moral or immoral is that it should be done. The act was done in full freedom, meaning you will it. No, you're the one who choose it. The one who do the act must have done the act according to his or her free choice, no, for her own volition, voluntarily. So philosophers, however, guys, were in disagreement as to what freedom is. A short exploration of how philosophers understand freedom would be helpful here. So let's just explore the four common ideas of freedom: that of Jean-Paul Sartre's absolute freedom, B.F. Skinner's determinist freedom, Nietzsche's freedom as creative, and Marcel and Levinas's idea of freedom as encounter. So despite the differences of these philosophers, all of them, except Skinner, who is a psychologist, are in accord with the free act as grounded on free choice. So freedom is a conscious act of conscious human beings, no? Not merely dictated by stimulus response of Skinner, which he wanted to point out, but actually it was later debunked by Viktor Frankl. So to elaborate, guys, a little bit of this freedom, I will begin with Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre, guys, believes that freedom is something that we do not just have. According to Sartre, guys, freedom is who we are. So we are our freedom. That is enshrined in a voluminous book of Jean-Paul Sartre, no, Being and Nothingness. According to Jean-Paul Sartre, guys, humans are absolutely free because humans are condemned to make choices. We are condemned to freedom. We cannot avoid, we cannot escape making choices. Because even not making a choice is already a choice. No, that is the enigma, the dilemma of the human condition. We cannot really escape making a choice because not making a choice is already a choice. And because of that, guys, freedom as a choice, according to Sartre, since you cannot escape your freedom, you cannot escape making choices. And that made your freedom absolute, meaning you are free to choose whatever you are going to choose in a given situation. For example, you are in a very terrible situation, you can choose to mourn, but you can also choose to be happy. That is what is meant by freedom according to Jean-Paul Sartre. It is not the freedom to do whatever you wanted to do, which is silly, no? Because obviously, if I wanted to go to Bohol right now, I don't have the freedom to do that, because I don't have the transportation. I'm not allowed, but I have the freedom to choose not to go there. That is what is freedom meant by Sartre. The freedom to choose in whatever way you wanted to choose as your response to the circumstances of life. Okay, that is what absolute freedom is. You're free to make whatever choice you wanted to make in your life. Okay, so don't get lost, because freedom here, according to Sartre, is more on your power to make the choice, because actions are actually effects of choices, no? But if you do actions without making a choice, that is terrible. Okay, so that is Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of freedom. You are free to make a choice as a conscious human being, which B.F. Skinner, guys, did not agree. No? A psychologist, according to B.F. Skinner, no, Jean-Paul Sartre, you are actually hallucinating, because freedom is an illusion. According to Jean-Paul Sartre, a human being is always influenced, shaped, and formed by his social, political, cultural, environmental conditions. That means the choice which Sartre wanted to tell us that is absolute, according to Skinner, actually it is limited and determined by our environment, by our political, cultural, social, economic, and name all those influences that influence the choices of the individual. Okay, so that is Skinner. So according to Skinner, there is no freedom. Freedom is only an idea, it's an illusion. That is why Skinner rather was very famous for a statement which he wrote in his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. I happened to read that when I was in college, and then the middle of the book I stopped and I actually literally threw the book to the flames. No, I don't believe in Skinner, because I cannot accept the idea that our choices are all products, no, of the different external factors in our lives. But Skinner, guys, remains a very influential figure, especially in sociology and even in psychology. Okay, so according to Skinner, in one of the portion of his book, he said, "Give me a newborn child and I will make him a saint." Very strong statement, because Skinner really believed that if you just arrange all the environments that is capable of forming a child into a saint, according to Skinner, it could be done, which later was actually debunked by Viktor Frankl. No? Another psychologist, according to Viktor Frankl, the conditions of life are not, they play in the shaping and the forming of people's choices, but they are not the absolute factor. Because when Frankl was imprisoned in the concentration camp during World War II, Joseph Campbell's not Joseph Campbell, sorry, Viktor Frankl. No, I used to mix the two because of the Frankl. Campbell is one of the personality which I introduced to my world lit classes. Okay, so according to Viktor Frankl, guys, there are so many crushing factors inside the concentration camp in Auschwitz. Some people choose to become a swine, but some people choose to be good. That means it is a debunking of Skinner's idea that it is only the environment that shapes us. According to Viktor Frankl, we have a say. We can choose, no? We can make a choice. We can say yes or no to a certain situation. So that is how Viktor Frankl questioned the idea of B.F. Skinner. Okay, so another, guys, idea of freedom is the one by Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most controversial philosophers, especially in the 19th century. Because if Descartes destroyed the authority of the church, Aristotle and Plato and all other authorities, guys, Nietzsche actually did not live, uh, although Nietzsche did not live during the time of Descartes, but Nietzsche destroyed even Descartes. Descartes enshrined reason, which Nietzsche tried to topple down. According to Nietzsche, no, the human being is a base instinct. That's what made Nietzsche very controversial as a philosopher. Okay, so I do research in college. My thesis in college was actually a comparison of Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of man and dehumanization. And I read a lot of Nietzsche's books, but I am now hiding them in my bookshelf for safekeeping, because you can only read Nietzsche if you have a good guide. That's not a good philosopher to read if you are alone. Okay, so for Nietzsche, guys, to understand the idea of freedom according to Nietzsche, we have to understand the development, metamorphosis of human beings. According to Nietzsche, all human beings passes through change stages of development. Some were able to achieve the ultimate, but some also were not able to achieve. According to Nietzsche, guys, there are three levels of human growth or stages, or in his famous book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he termed it metamorphosis. The first stage is characterized by what we call the camel stage. Yeah, the camel, yeah, the animal in the desert used to carry baggages. Especially when the Arabs, the desert people, cross the desert, guys, they use the camel, and that is the first stage according to Nietzsche. The second is the lion, and then the third stage is the child. According to him, some people only develop as a lion. Some people grow up to be a child, but most people actually remain as a camel. What are camels, guys? Camels are, burdened, no, with loads at the back. According to Nietzsche, that is how people act in society. They are loaded with standards, norms, morals, things to do and things that should not be done. And the sad thing is, we are carrying these loads without us understanding why they exist. We just carry them, and with that, we follow without even questioning. I'm not telling you to question everything, but I'm telling you that there are really practices that needs reflection. Okay, and then all people, when you reach teenager, you begin to go against the will of your parents. When your parents said no love life yet, and then because you meet someone very beautiful or very handsome, you begin to feel different, and that is the moment you try to rebel against the will of your parents. In that moment, guys, you become a lion. Okay, when you try to question the ways of society, when you try to question the standards of society, that is the moment you become a lion. But according to Nietzsche, when you are a lion, you are not yet freed, because you are reacting from standards. Just like the camel, you are just obeying the standards, meaning it's the same stimulus, no? Fight and flight has the same root. What is that? Fear is the root of fight and flight. So when you fight, you're a lion. You're reacting as to someone using your fear in fighting. But when you flight, no, when you go away, escape, it's the same stimulus that moves you. It's fear. So that is why, according to Nietzsche, you are not yet freed if you are just fighting against, and if you're obeying, so much more. That is why it is true psychologically. When you love the person and when you hate the person, you are not yet freed from the person. Especially when you hate the person, because when you hate the person, guess that person has the capacity of making your nights as sleepless nights. You are thinking about the person you hate, and in that sense, guys, indirectly the person controls your sleep. You are not yet freed from that person. Okay, so that is it. That is why the opposite of love, guys, is not hate but indifference. And just in the same way with camel and lion analogy, The opposite of obeying is not fighting. That is why we need a third stage, according to Nietzsche. And that stage is the stage of the child when rules, that is where Nietzsche becomes dangerous. No? When all rules are only a matter of play. But it is not really about just going against. That's really a matter of really destroying the norms of society. It is understanding who you really are as the root source of all of these standards, which happen to become a collective will of society. All people agreed on all of those standards, and they do not question that they are themselves the root of it. That is why Nietzsche calls for a reevaluation of values. Nietzsche said we have to evaluate our beliefs, our standards, so that we'll be living a life that we decide and not by the crowd. No, so Nietzsche try to differentiate between a herd mentality and the overmensch, the superman. Those people are capable of creating their own values and their own standards. Because according to Nietzsche, if you just happen to be following everything that society is telling you, you are just like a member of the flock. No, you are just following blindly. And that is where, according to Nietzsche, when you reach the level of the child, that is the moment you become fully free. That is what freedom is, the power to create yourself, the power to create your values, your beliefs. That is where Nietzsche, guys, becomes controversial and very dangerous, because his philosophy could be abused, could be misused, and could be misinterpreted. Okay, that is why a lot of people who did not graduate in philosophy read Nietzsche, and they became arrogant. No, they became arrogant because that is the effect when you read Nietzsche without a proper guide. Okay, so that is Nietzsche, guys. Freedom as creative. Okay, and the last, guys, is freedom as encounter by Levinas and um, Gabriel Marcel. No? Just to repeat, perhaps I have shared this to you in our previous virtual classes. Levinas is the teacher of my teacher in Masteral. I have a teacher in Masteral, professor, a French professor of philosophy, who was a student of Levinas himself. Levinas is an original philosopher, a thinker. He wrote, among others, his book on totality and infinity, otherwise than being, and other books. And he was a Jew, and he revolted against the Nazis during the time of the Second World War. Marcel and Levinas' idea of freedom, guys, has something in common, because their ideas of freedom takes into account that when you do actions, you are not doing it only as alone as you are. You're doing a certain action in a community, in a shared experience of people you love, people you don't love, people you only meet. Your action always has implications, consequences on the people around you. That is why they criticized heavily Sartre's idea of freedom, which is very individualistic, and also Nietzsche's freedom, which is also very isolationist, individualistic. And according to freedom as encounter, guys, the freedom proposed by Jean-Paul Sartre is a lonely kind of freedom. It's very terrible. It can be compared to a person sailing in the middle of the ocean. The person may go to whatever direction he may choose to go. He can go east, west, south, north, but he doesn't have a destination. According to Marcel and Levinas, that kind of freedom which doesn't have a destination is not freedom at all. That person is not free. That person is lost. Okay, I repeat, if you believe that you can just choose whatever you wanted to choose, or even do whatever you wanted to do, that is not freedom. You are not free. You are actually lost. Very nice idea of Marcel and Levinas, because according to Marcel, I can only become who I am if I am in a relationship with others. Now, not relationship, the one you have a crush, or you have uyab, or girlfriend, boyfriend. No. Relationship meaning I am being able to respond to the call of the other. Meaning I am responsible not only for myself but also for my fellow men, as well as my fellow men is responsible not only for themselves but for each other. And that is the kind of freedom which actually grow from world war scenarios, guys, when people are actually hurting and hitting each other. According to Marcel, we have forgotten the idea that being is relating. To be who we are is to relate. It's not just to do, it's not just to decide, but to relate. And that is why Levinas also developed the idea that the first philosophy is not really metaphysics, which is the search for being. No, it is actually ethics, which is an encounter of one person with another in a face-to-face situation. I encounter you as a face, you encounter me as a face. That is why when you are staring at each other for a long time, you begin to feel ashamed, according to Levinas, because the face is the most naked part of the human body, and it is associated with shame. That is why people put on something on that, no, to hide, to cover, and etc. So, meaning, there is really no freedom without encounter. There's really no freedom without relationship. And the full destination of freedom is I can only be fully free if I love. Because according to them, love is the sole fulfillment of freedom. By freedom, if it is not destined to reach to the other person, if it is not destined to love the other person, that freedom is lost. So meaning, I can only be free if I love, if I respond to the call of the other. Okay, a very religious type of freedom, no? A freedom that asks us to be responsible. In the Old Testament, God said to Cain, "Where is Abel?" And then said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Okay, so that is the idea behind the idea of freedom. Freedom as not only doing, but freedom as being responsible for the other. Very nice idea of freedom, especially in our times when freedom is already being abused and already being misused. Okay, that is why, guys, when you choose to love a person, your freedom is not lost. It has actually it has actually found its destination, and that destination is our freedom. Okay, and the fourth, guys, is knowledge. Okay, so by knowledge, guys, we mean obviously knowledge, our capacity to know. And with that, guys, my mouse is not functioning. You should function now. Okay, so we have freedom, knowledge rather. Okay, knowledge. An ethical act needs knowledge as a requirement, because any person who does something that he or she is not knowledgeable of cannot be held responsible for the actions. A classic example is an insane person doing something not good in the eyes of the people, but actually we cannot subject the insane person to legal processes and decree to him or her judgment or judicial judgment. No? You haven't heard of an insane person being imprisoned in a regular penitentiary. They are rehabilitated because of the absence of knowledge. They cannot be fully held responsible for the action, for the morality or immorality of the action. Okay? So, however, ethical theories conceive that there are two forms of lack of knowledge or ignorance. Insofar as this requirement of a moral act is concerned, okay, which we need to explore at depth so that you will not be lost. So, we have the two kinds of ignorance. We have the vincible and invincible ignorance. Vincible ignorance, guys, is a form of ignorance or lack of knowledge in moral judgment, where the one who acts can have the chance to know the rightness or badness of the act. An example would be if you happen to cheat in the exams because you were absent during the last meeting, but you did not ask your classmates of the updates in the class. That is vincible ignorance, because something could have been done on your side to know the updates in the class, but you did not ask. That is what we call vincible ignorance, a type of ignorance that can be remedied. So a classic example is the person who justifies his cheating by saying, I cheated, teacher, because I was absent last time. That kind of immoral act is not justifiable because the ignorance is vincible, meaning it could be remedied if only the student asked his classmates and studied the notes. Okay, so that is vincible ignorance. In this case, guys, you're held responsible for cheating in the exams. You committed something morally wrong. So invincible ignorance, on the other hand, is a form of ignorance or lack of knowledge where the one who acts has no way of knowing in the course of the action the rightness or badness of an act. A classic example would be Hitler's parents making a choice to give birth to a son only later to become the cause of the murder of several millions of Jews. So Hitler's parents cannot know of what their son could become, so that is invincible ignorance. So we need to take into account, guys, this vincible and invincible ignorance in judging the morality of an action based on knowledge, so that we will not be so that we will not be abusing knowledge, especially as the fourth requirement or determinant of reality. Okay, so in the course of the development of ethical theories, there are philosophers and thinkers who question the first two requirements, because as they ask, is it that possible to live good moral lives when you happen not to believe in God and the immortality of the soul? Which actually we can observe, no, there are so many atheists living good lives, no? Some of them are even living better lives, no, than believers. So that is why these two requirements, especially in the modern, postmodern eras, are a little bit weakened. Okay, so are they really required? That is the question, no, for the person to be morally good. So modern and contemporary theories of ethics tend to disregard the two because of these two requirements: God and immortality of the soul's inclination to adhere to beliefs instead of reason alone. So most ethical theories now are only grounded on freedom and knowledge. But there are still a few who defended the necessity and the importance of the four requirements of an ethical act, existence of God and immortality of the soul included. Okay, so that is, or those are the four determinants. So to judge an act or to assess the value of the morality of an act, we need to consider these four: existence of God, okay, as the supreme value of goodness, and then immortality of the soul as the possibility of retribution, of accounting of your actions before, obviously, God. And then another is that act must be freely done, meaning you're the one choosing the act and not other people. And fourth is you should be in full knowledge to have done the act. Any absence of the two, especially knowledge and freedom, you can actually be excused, but obviously the judgment is that you are insane. Or especially if you're a child, a baby, for example, accidentally is the cause of the death of someone else. Can you hold the baby responsible? No, because of the absence of knowledge and choice. Okay, so that is it. So another important distinctions, guys, that students in ethics should learn is the distinction made between human acts and acts of man. So what are human acts? So human acts are acts that are subject to moral or ethical judgments. as these acts proceed from the person's free will and full knowledge of the actions, whereas acts of man are acts which are dictated by instincts or acts that don't require free will and knowledge. For example, um, your stomach digesting your food, that is acts of man. Your heart, no, beating normally, no, to pump out and pump in blood through your system. We call these acts of man, dictated by instincts. Human acts are acts which are, yeah, you decided and you have full knowledge of. Okay? So in order to fully account the action of a morally accountable person, the following factors rather, must be present in judging or asserting the rightness or wrongness of a human act. Now, this according to Dr. Mabulok, my friend, a philosophy teacher in Ateneo de Davao University. Okay, we have the three: motive or action. You have to take note of the motive of the action. And then second, the circumstances or the situation. And then the third is the nature of the act itself. The three factors should be taken into account in assessing the act. No? Because sometimes we need to question the motive. All the three must be accounted for because an act may appear to be an act of kindness but can become a form of hypocrisy if the motive is self-promotion or selfish gain. On the other hand, an act might be wrong in our perspective because we are not in the same situation of the person doing the action. And the complexity of the interrelationship between these factors render ethics one of the thorniest and the rockiest road in philosophy because all ethical judgments reflect value judgments, and people through their growth have developed their different values according to how culture, society, politics, religion acts on those values. Even if we are aware of that one voice, do good, avoid evil, but we cannot deny the fact that along our growth, this voice is being overshadowed by several factors and influences. Okay, so that's it for this week, guys. For next week, we'll be exploring more on the old conflict between ethical relativism and ethical absolutism, and some of the preliminary paradigms in ethics during the classical era. I hope you understand the discussion, guys, and the presentation. And we will be dealing with more questions as we have our virtual class sometime within this week. Okay, so I hope you are now beginning to figure out the complexity and the beauty of ethics. Okay, thank you very much.